Today on the Dolby Institute Podcast, filmmaking advice for first-time filmmakers from first-time filmmakers. I recently sat down with the participants from the Dolby Institute and Ghetto Film School, finished the script challenge on the day after their big Los Angeles premiere to talk about their experiences while it was still fresh in their minds in order to get their unfiltered perspectives. What was it like watching their films on a giant screen in a packed theater? What would they have done differently? How did they deal with tight budgets, difficult crew members, and even their own imposter syndrome? Whether you're a film student or an aspiring one about to become a first-time filmmaker or a seasoned pro, this is a rare glimpse into the raw insights of young directors who have each taken the first step into their professional careers. The links to all their films are in the episode description, but their advice is universal even if you haven't seen them. All that and more on today's episode, which is the 150th episode of the Dolby Institute Podcast. I am thrilled today to be sitting down with the filmmakers for the Year 2 GFS Dolby Institute Finish the Script Challenge. We have Caitlin Ali, who directed Pause Play, Brittany Bautista, who directed Fruits of Your Labor, and Thomas Sawyer, who directed Sirens. I also want to give a shout out to the fourth director, Miguel Ramirez, who made a pretty remarkable movie called Zora's Last Day. But he is out on the picket lines with his union brothers and sisters with the WGA today, so he's not able to join us. Well, one of the things that we did a little differently this year with the Finish the Script Challenge is we brought all of you to Los Angeles last summer. After you got picked, like about 2 weeks later, we said you got to come to LA for a couple of days, and I know that was a difficult thing for some people for some of you to like drop everything and come to LA. But we wanted to get everybody together for a couple of days for this intense kind of script workshop and have this opportunity to put you all in a room with Carlos López Estrada, read each other's scripts, give each other feedback, really kind of tear things apart and play with, before you went out and shot, obviously. So I would love for you to tell me about like that couple of days. What was that process like for you? Did you feel ready to have other people look at your material? Like what was it like kind of in a public fashion like that, kind of workshopping and sharing your ideas? Because there were some pretty interesting conversations that came out of that. You guys questioned each other quite a bit.
Yeah. I mean, again,
I think for me, I was so excited to see what the other filmmakers came up with from the prompt. And it was just really nice to like workshop our scripts, like literally at a round table. We can't leave the room, like we have nowhere to go and just focus on our ideas. And I think it was super helpful to be in person, especially I know for Thomas's film when we were like confused about like the body swapping and like how that worked, like literally physically drawing it out was so helpful.
That's right. At one point you like jumped up to the dry erase board and like mapped everything out and like walked
this is where she is.
I needed a brain dump. I couldn't.
It was
I can't.
amazing, honestly. And you're like going through the drawers looking for markers. Like it was so great.
Yeah, that table read experience was one of the like highlights of this process for me, because this was the first time I've ever written anything, first time I made a pitch deck, first time I've dabbled in narrative, and I have avoided critique for a very long time. I've been very insulated. And so kind of getting thrown in the deep end was like, it's crucial. But I remember being in that room and I like, we went in order of how we were seated. So Miguel went first, then Caitlin, then Brittany, and I was last. And I remember like the second script we read, I just shut down and I went into a panic. And I was like, I don't belong here. I'm not supposed to be here. These people are great. I'm not. And the thing that I learned through all that process was like, this is the time for me to make mistakes. This is the time for me to be vulnerable. GFS and Dolby have taken the time to, they've taken a shot on me. They've trusted me. They've showed me respect, and I need to be present here in a way to be respectful for them. And it allowed me to just be open and just kind of release.
I definitely felt that way too. Going into it, I was very intimidated by everyone. Like everybody's so charismatic and outgoing, and I was like, oh my God, I don't belong here. Like, it's scary. I've never done something this big, and like having all the attention on us like was crazy. Like, I love attention, but at the same time I don't. Like, it's scary. Just everybody was there. Everybody there was so supportive and just so passionate about helping us, which was so comforting. Like, the entire Dolby team, the entire Ghetto Film School team was just like from day one, like so supportive. And I think that was what was so motivating about the project and made me want to like put my all into it. And I think the other thing that was nice too is having a group of people that are writing a script that is like really absurd and like sci-fi based, because when I told this idea to like my friends at school, they were like, that's crazy. And like, why are you doing that? Why is it like a body swap? Like, I told one of my professors in college, and she was like, oh, that sounds really ambitious. Like, I don't know if you can do that. And I hear that all the time. Like, with all of my ideas, it's like, that's too ambitious. Like, you need to like change some stuff so that you can shoot it more realistically. And I was like, well, you guys told me like it was cool, so I'm gonna stick with it. But I think the fact that we were all like writing films about body swaps, like, I feel like it was a safe space to talk about the ideas, but like versus like in my class, they were like, why are you writing a Freaky Friday type film?
No.
You know?
They
So
should be
you actually, so you
embracing.
went back. You were at NYU, right?
I'm at Pratt.
At Pratt. Okay. So you took the script and went back, and you did some work on it in the context of your schoolwork as well.
Yeah, it was originally going to be my senior thesis, and the feedback was so different at my school versus here. So I think it was really nice to have the support like in this space. Like, I felt very safe like with my idea.
Here's what I'll say about film school, because I went to film school. I went to UNCSA, and that is like, you are like fully enveloped in film from like freshman to senior year, and like you breathe and eat it 24/7. And I feel like when you start off in you're in film school, and then eventually when you get into the industry, there's just like such a major shift because now you're actually starting to work. But like, I remember in the screenwriting classes that we had, we would like tear each other's scripts apart. And like, you're coming like, and especially because like, you know, you're coming out of high school, or you might be, or you know, like, you know how to be coming out of high school, but like, that's your first time in a setting where you're like trying to critique other people's work. And I feel like they're still in the stage of like learning how to critique, and also learning how to like, you know, sandwich notes and all those things. So I feel like we were doing that in the room, and we had like professionals who have like worked in the industry or currently working in the industry, and we have so many voices. When we had like, you know, we have Amanda, we had, you know, Glenn, we had all these voices in the room, and even Carlos, and someone who's like literally directing huge studio films, and he's here to like be supportive. And I feel like sometimes there's this competitive edge that's in college. And so, you know, it gets a little iffy, but I feel like it was such a good move on y'all's part to do this workshop. I was so excited because it kind of brought me back to this like, oh my gosh, I haven't done this since college, and I was ready for us to all tear each other's scripts apart. But like, having like that group and trying to be supportive of each other, and you guys set the tone from the beginning. And I think that was helpful.
Thomas, I'm curious to ask you, I feel like your project probably changed the most from the first script that we read to what we saw last night.
Yeah.
And I'd love for you to talk just about the kind of the evolution of where you started, the story you started telling, and how it changed and evolved over the process.
Yeah, so that was really wonderful. I think, simple answer, feedback. So it came from the table read, and like the script that we read was just my first draft. And like I was planning to do a rewrite and lost track of time, so I'm presenting this thing that is insanely rough, which again, like I said, when I was there, I was starting to freak out about. But on the back end of it, hindsight, I realized that it was so wonderful because I had the most space to go from. And so I went into the rewrite thinking about how to consolidate. I started with this concept that was really complicated, and I had, so my film Sirens is about a teenager who's struggling with their identity. And originally, it had more of a body swapping element. There was another character that I'd introduced. There's multiple locations. There's all of these things. And through the pre-production, the writing process, the table read, I was able to consolidate that down. And then when we were planning the filming, I knew I was going to have to shoot it in 10 days, or not 10 days, in 2 days. And I had access to this location that cost me a tenth of my budget to rent. And so I was like, I got to make the most of it. So I shaved off all the stuff there. And then we came into editing and I started shaving things off. So the thing that you're seeing on the back end is a film that has been written one way, then shot one way, then edited one way. And it's every version of it is completely different.
Brittany, I want to follow up on something that you said earlier, because we were joking about this last night. We had some big concerns about your script when it came in. We loved it, but we're like, it's a generous grant. You guys each got a $25,000 grant to go shoot your movies and then come into Dolby to do the vision grade and the Atmos sound mix. But, $25,000 doesn't necessarily go very far. And, your script I think it was maybe the longest of the four. You had a lot of scenes. You had street scenes in New York City. You have a whole scene in a church with a congregation, and then you had this insane magic mango that leaps off the fruit stand and follows people down the street, and then hops into goes into the smoothie shop and hop. So we were just very concerned about how is she going to do this. And I'm curious because I think we did push on you pretty hard. Like, you might want to think about simplifying this. It's exactly what you were saying. Like, that was the feedback that we were kind of, gently giving you. But tell me about the process of like hearing that. But you stuck to your gut.
First off, that's like completely valid to have those concerns. And I think one thing I learned is I feel like you have to find a balance between killing your darlings, but also sticking true to your story, regardless of what people will advise you. And it's hard because it's like you don't want to sacrifice things in your story. Like going into this, I knew I wanted to have this mango rolling down the street. I knew that was like the pivotal moment, and that was what would capture people's capture an audience. And I think as a young filmmaker who, this is the biggest budget I've ever had, and it's not even a lot like in terms of like the scope of Hollywood, but I thought $25,000 to me was like a lot. And I was like, oh my God, I could go crazy. Like I could hire all these background actors. I could like block out a street in Queens. And then I realized like the more I talked with my producer, Kayla, about budget, I was like, that's not feasible. Like we need to pay all of the crew, and that's just not gonna happen. And so it was just definitely a challenge between like, how can I still tell this story, but also, like not go crazy, not go over budget. So I think that's something that I would advise myself to young filmmakers is, it sounds like a lot of money, but you really have to like, there's so many things that you don't think about that are part of the budget that you later have to pay for, like permits and like food, insurance. And so I think, again, it's just like a balance of just like sticking true to your story, but there's a way to do it where you can still tell your story, but in a less like unrealistic way. So instead of like hiring background actors, I reached out on Facebook groups, like to Filipino Facebook groups in New York. And I was like, does anybody want to be in my film? It's going to be at a church. And I feel like you have to finesse your way. Like, I think as a young filmmaker, that's what you have to do, like finesse and really hustle just to like find things that are free. Because locations is definitely like the most expensive thing. So you just have to find people that will do favors for you, which is really hard.
But you also were just ingenious about doing the low tech thing. Like we were all concerned about the magic mango, but you were just like, I'm going to toss it down the street. Like it's going to be very simple. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated.
Well, it was originally going to be animated because my roommate, she's a 3D animator, and I had this whole plan of like the mango like being animated down the street and it's gonna look more realistic. But the more I thought about it, it's like people aren't even gonna think a magic mango is like realistic. Like it's not, people aren't gonna believe that's real anyway, so why not just make it like absurd? At some point I was like, okay, let's just give up like the animation. That's crazy, it's not feasible, and let's just have our set designer Lizzie just roll a mango. And it was really funny because during the set we had to like figure out who was the best at the mango rolling. And it turned out to be our PA Tim. He just had like that magic like flow. Like I don't know what about his arm, like the angle, it was just like perfect.
He was the mango whisperer.
Yeah, he was. And that day that we did all the mango stuff, it was super frustrating. I think that was like the most stressful part of it. Just like having the mango roll at a perfect speed so it doesn't hit their feet, like getting it through the door before they close it, like having it weave through, go at a certain angle, like have it be in frame. Like it was so frustrating. And it was like in Lower East Side, like the busiest part of, Manhattan, but it was definitely worth it.
What was it like first day on the set? You show up, it's a big, you each had a pretty big crew, and you show up and all these people are looking at you because you're the director, and they're asking, what do you want me to do? Tell me about that experience of that first day on set.
Something that I learned first day on set is that you need to prepare and you need to like be ready to have answers immediately. And then you have to make sure you're getting your days. And like that's the crazy part, is having to make sure that like you get everything you need to edit it together.
Yeah, because your job as the director is not to accommodate all these people and make them happy, right? Yeah. They're there to service your vision.
One of the things that went wrong on my set, well, not particularly went wrong, but it was just like, it sucked that we had to do it, is add another day. And it was added on like the week before. And it was because in my mind, I thought that we could get like 5 locations shot in one day because they're all like in the same kind of area. But I didn't take into account like the amount of time it takes to travel there. There's gonna be rush hour. We need to get people situated, like set up. And it was really like difficult to accept that, because then if I add another day, that's a whole other like day rate.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah, like that's gonna be like another day rate for like 20 people, and you have to take that into account. So I really didn't want to do that. But in the end, I know that if I did do that, it would make everybody on my crew so stressed out, because they were already stressed out on that day. So like I'm really glad that I added that last day. And the last day was so like, it was so peaceful and easy, and we all like celebrated with our little mangoes at the end. So I'm really glad that I just listened to my producer.
Tell me about your collaborations. I know some of you had a few bumps in the road with your collaborators, and in some cases actually made some changes midway through the process. What was that like? What did that feel like? How difficult was that in for each of you?
As I was getting into the sound design process, I was realizing that the sound wasn't getting to where it needed to be in order to, like really take full advantage of what Dolby Atmos does and what it is and what it means. Like as a filmmaker and for the audience, I needed to start changing directions, and that was a really difficult decision to make. It's never easy, like parting ways with anyone. And as I mentioned earlier, like just bumping heads and having those really tough conversations. I spoke to my mentor, and he really helped me dive in and like find the right person for the job. And then from there, we were actually able to build out like a bigger team of people, which is typically what's done on like the studio feature films. On indie shows, sometimes it's just like 1 or 2 people who are like your supervising sound editor, but we were able to have a whole team. And I feel like that was what what Pause Play needed, was to have like multiple people working. I was just really excited to get access to a team who could all come up with ideas on their own and all work separately, and then like have the supervising sound editor come together and like make it super cohesive.
So surprisingly enough, I didn't really have that many issues at all with my collaborators on set. And I think that's because I really kind of found my people. and I found my crew and I found who I worked best with. And I think that's so important as a young filmmaker to find people that you know you get along with and you work well with on set. I have a best friend who we've literally been best friends for like 8 years, and we're both in the film industry, but when we work together, we like clash. And so I don't work with her because we both know we don't get along on set. So sometimes even like the people that you consider close friends, like sometimes they're not beneficial to the project sometimes. And so I made it a point to have POC and specifically Filipino people on my set and women of color. And because of that, it was just such an amazing crew. Everybody got along so well with each other. But I think the more you get into filmmaking, really, like, even if you're like gaffing or if you're doing sound, talk to the people you're with, and you just like find people, like you literally like collect them like little like crystals along the way, like these little gems. So you just have to like get those people on your set.
Building my team was crazy. I guess one of the things that I didn't think I would instill this, but one of the things, make sure your website's up to date. Young filmmakers, like, because I found my DP through a Google search, and because of that, like, I emailed him. He got back to me. He was on set, so I got back to me at the end of the day, and within 30 minutes of that second email, we had a cold call, and I was like, "You're it. I want to work with you. You get it." We clicked. And he built out the entire team. And so I came onto set with not having talked to anyone else on my team, and just like I had instilled in them like what I was doing, and I like they knew the pitch deck, they knew what we were doing, they knew the script, they knew the vision. But yeah, I didn't know anyone personally. The problem I had was having files that weren't opening in Baselight for my grade, and at the end of the day, it's my fault. Like, as the director, everything that goes wrong is my fault. And you have to take full responsibility because you're in charge. And on top of that, like, it really just comes down to the fact that I'm green. And like, I've never taken a finished film and handed it off to a company like Dolby and had it mastered in this way. And having this experience, having it on a project that is at this level, at this scale, sets me up to be ready to do that on a much larger scale, be prepared. So it all kind of ties back into that mantra of like, make mistakes. And for me, it was a hard experience. It was bumpy, but it made it so that in the future I am prepared, and I know how this system works, I know how the machine works, and I can operate in it smoothly.
Last night we had the big premiere at the Academy Museum, presenting your short films in Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos in front of a pretty packed house. What was it like being in that room, seeing your work on like a 60-foot screen for the first time?
It was overwhelming, to say the least. It was, I have a really hard time being in a theater with my own work, so I don't even know what it looks like. I had my eyes closed the entire time. So I've still not seen my own film. But I was just like, the event as a whole was just really beautiful. I got to speak with some really incredible people and join in the celebration with my fellow filmmakers. So it was great.
Yeah, I think it was super surreal, to say the least. Like, I keep thinking that the premiere didn't happen yet and it's still like 2 weeks away. I can't believe like it just went by in the blink of an eye. And I feel like, I don't know, everything went by so fast. I was just talking to so many people, and just seeing the reaction to my film was so beautiful. And just having my family there and like having my friends see it, it was a really nice experience.
Honestly, I feel like I was in like stages of denial, like leading up to the night of the premiere. And at first I was like, oh, I'm excited, but then I got sad, and then I was nervous, and it was like one day, then the next day, then the next day. And then the day of, I was like, oh my God, I have to vomit.
Did you really?
I was sick to my stomach, and also I was just like trying to like rush to get ready, and like I honestly, like when I got to the Academy Museum, I was like, oh my gosh, this is happening. Like, stepped out on the sidewalk, and you know, I've been there before to like go see films and to go look at the museum, and I still haven't gone through the whole thing. I just can't believe that we were even able to premiere our films in those spaces. Like, that's incredible, and that's an amazing honor to have. And to say that like our films got to like screen there, I kind of was absolutely floored. And then we got downstairs and got everybody like into the theater, and honestly, you're kind of just like head tipped back, and it's like the final moment. There's no other changes you can make anymore at that point. And I was just literally like floored that everyone was able to see it in like such a beautiful space that was like curated by you guys.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great night for sure. I want to go back to the beginning. We took you to the Vine, which is our screening room here in Hollywood, and we kind of gave you like the full-on Dolby Vision, Dolby Atmos demo, and kind of explain, because that's part of the whole, I mean, it's the reason why Dolby's doing this. Like, part of the whole challenge is like, we want to give you guys access to this technology that we've developed, Dolby Vision, Dolby Atmos, for you to explore, you know, making your stories as spectacular and immersive and engaging as they can possibly be. And obviously that's not, you know, these are not technologies that are normally available to student filmmakers working, you know, making short films. But that's kind of the whole point of why we're doing this. So that very first day we brought you in and kind of strapped you to the rocket and said, here's Dolby Vision, Dolby Atmos. This is what you're going to be. This is a tool that you have available to you. You do whatever you want to with it, but it's yours. So tell me about your first reaction to that. And
Yeah.
was that exciting? Was it scary? Was it overwhelming?
I was grinning in my chair. I was like
shaking in my boots. Like, it was, when I will never shut up about this, but when during the demo, when it says like, this isn't black, and then
yes,
it goes,
and when it
"This is
happened
black."
yesterday at
And
the
I was
Academy
like-
Museum, I was like, yes, snaps.
I got goosebumps.
Like, you know, you hear about it. You hear about it through like, oh, you know, this thing is Dolby Atmos, this thing is Dolby Vision, and you like, is this? It's at the bottom of the screen when I'm looking at the credits. But then actually going into a space where you have like all the tools like readily available and it's formatted for said thing. I could not believe the sound when you guys. What was the song that was playing? There's a song.
Marvin Gaye.
Marvin Gaye, yeah.
Marvin Gaye.
Yeah.
And the lights were
Oh,
off
that
in
was,
the
like-
room. It was crazy.
That was so euphoric. I wish I could
Yes.
have like stayed in there for another 5 hours and just played like my favorite songs.
Yes.
I remember we went to dinner and they were talking about the live experience in Las Vegas, and we're like, are we gonna do a trip from here? We're gonna go out to Las Vegas. We're gonna do the Atmos Theater. Yeah, because it was just like, I think you did a really good job of bringing us all together as a team, even though like we're complete strangers. Like, you gave us 2 hours in this theater of like you said, strapped to the rocket. We're like, okay, we're all bonded together over this like crazy, overwhelming experience. And then we got to just dive right into the table read as like a unit, as opposed to like 4 strangers ready to rip each other's head off.
To just go back to the theater super quick, I think that you have to like, you know, see it to believe it, hear it to believe it kind of thing. And I'm just like, separately, I'm going to go to my first like Dolby Cinema to watch like a feature film, and I'm gonna go see Guardians of the Galaxy 3 tomorrow with my family. And we were like, let's give Dolby our money and let's go sit in these chairs. Like, I'm so ready.
Yes.
I'm so ready. And because we got the opportunity to do exactly what these filmmakers did on a huge budget, I'm just so stoked to like be able to be a part of this experience. And to know like what they are going through is the same thing that like we just went through.
They just had a little more money.
Yeah, just a little.
I think going back to what Caitlin said about how we always see Dolby like in the big films. Like, we're always like, oh, this is made by Dolby. Oh, and like when I go to the movie theaters, I see like the Dolby Cinema, and I just kind of like, I know it's a big company, and I know like they're really good at what they do, but I never like actually think about how amazing their technology is until I went to that theater, and I was like, holy shit, like this is insane. Like, that I watch these movies and I overlook it. I never think, oh my God, there's like 100 speakers that like the sound travels back and forth, and like the color is so vibrant and saturated. And I had a found love and appreciation for like Dolby technology like after that experience. And I think the other thing is watching that, I felt like the stakes were so much higher, like in terms of my own film, because I was like, you guys are putting so much work into my film, and it's gonna be color graded and mixed in Dolby. It has to be good, and I have to, like, they're gonna slap their name on it, so you know it has to be amazing.
Well, I'm curious about, did it, like, you got that experience, did it kind of, then did you go back and look at your script and kind of think about, like, how do I make use of this? I'm curious.
When I applied, there was a lot of stuff asking about, like, how could you incorporate sound, or how can you incorporate, use the technology, and I did think about it to an extent, but then after listening and watching in the theater, I was like, okay, now I can, like, I didn't know that it was like that insane. So I really went back in the script and I was like, I'm gonna add this sound, I'm gonna add this sound here, the sound's gonna travel. Like, I really delved back into it, and I think Dolby helped make my film so much more immersive, especially like the scene where she's it walks down Queens for the first time. I definitely, me and Jürgen, we worked on the sound design just on that scene for like half a day. Like, it was insane, but I definitely think it helped, like, with the immersive part.
Because you wanted to put the audience on the street with, with the characters. Yeah. Thomas, what about you?
I'm kind of a nerd. I did a huge deep dive as soon as I found out about the project. And so, like, I researched the company, I researched vision and Atmos, and then I went to the theater and I was like, I got to see what this is about. So when I came back, I was obviously so blown away that I wrote my entire script around what my characters were hearing off the bat. And then coming into Atmos, what that really did for my script, it wasn't revisions for script, it was preparation for sound design and sound recording on set. Like, I gotta make sure that I'm prioritizing that over even capturing visuals. Because for me, Atmos was just like, this is gonna make what I'm doing. This is gonna be everything all at once. And so I really prioritized that. So for me, it kind of helped me understand where my priorities lie.
Tell me about the sound mix. What did you learn? What was fun about that project and about that part of the process? And I guess, how will that affect your future projects moving forward?
The mix for pause play is honestly one of the coolest things I think I've ever worked on in terms of sound. Starting just with the design itself, like, absolutely incredible. And
you have a lot of opportunities for. I mean, you're kind of playing with the aesthetics of, like, the game world and real life and this afterworld. So you've got a lot of really great opportunities for creative sound design built into the world.
Yeah, and it was intentional. Like, from the beginning, like when I saw the competition in the first place, and coming from a post-production background, and also, like, coming up in the studio system in post, getting to be on dub stages, seeing how shows are mixed, and seeing how, like, like, looking at the Pro Tools track and seeing all of the layers, and all the food groups. And I wanted to emulate that, and that's very much what I wanted Pause Play to be. It was this little baby studio movie for $25,000, and and I wanted, like, in my pitch deck when I was creating it, I was like, I want these kinds of sounds. Like, I want the 8-bit sounds. I want the video game kind of sounds. I want to be able to, like, talk to my sound designer or about, like, how can we utilize Atmos? And I was thinking about that way ahead of time. And even with Dolby Vision, like, it through VFX, like, how can I boost this technology and, like, literally max it out? Especially, like, it was so funny. I just remembered, like, through the rainbow portal that you guys had, like, when you had the demo play right before the screening at the Academy Museum, I was just like, oh, I did do that.
I think your rainbow portal might actually be better than ours.
No, yeah.
Copy and paste it. And so, to go back to the sound, I'm such a sound nerd, and I will, like, literally end my emails with, like, sound and music teams and be like, I'm gonna bounce like a stem. Super corny. But I just, sound gets me so excited. And what I learned in film school, like, your movie is 60% sound, 40% visual. And I couldn't argue with that, because, like, not only does sound, like, obviously you're using your ears, but you're also feeling it. And so I think that's something that, like, I really wanted to do with Eric Foreman. He was our mixer. It was just like I really wanted the audience to feel the effects and like feel the explosions. And when I was working with Matt, I was saying like, dude, like we gotta have like F1 racer cars like zooming overhead in the rainbow portal. And you know, we tried to place as many you know, options as we could so that Eric could use the objects, because that's what they're like, right? The Atmos objects, and he could place as many as he could instead of having to like copy and paste what we had and make his job a little easier, and just have them just like fly overhead. And like it was really cool to see like Eric messing around on the table and just like using the faders and like mixing everything, and also getting to see like the objects move in a 3D space. Because I think at least from what I've seen when I was in the studio, like studio system, you could see like the objects moving, but in a 2D space, it's very flat. But this time, like Eric, you could see him moving, and it was like literally a cube, and you could see him like pushing things around the room. And I just like I know you guys showed that in the workshop, but then actually getting to do it in person, but then you're also in a time crunch. So and you know, like you had to go in at least like I went in with like a very set plan and talked with Matt beforehand about like, okay, these are the kind of things we want to move around the room. And like Eric, we know we're limited on time, so like this is the most important stuff, and Eric asked us to like, you know, prioritize like primary, secondary. So it was like a learning process for me too, because like even though I do have a lot of knowledge about that part of the process, getting to actually sit in the director's chair and work with Eric, and also Michael, my composer, was there. And like that was exciting to get to see like where they're placing instruments and all of the sounds, and you know, especially using the back of the space and getting to kind of move. We're trying to move music from like, you know, the typical like left right setting, and placing it all around the sides and across the top, like the ceiling. And I think, you know, moving out of that traditional like, you know, score and trying to kind of like expand that in Atmos.
Brittany, what about you? The mix process, what'd you learn?
Jürgen taught me something really interesting that I didn't realize that was really essential to sound, is like the music. Like I was kind of just like placing music, because I edited it. I was placing music in random places, and it just faded out, but I didn't really think about how it faded out. So he, like when he listened to it, he was like tapping hit with his finger, and like, oh, like it's not ending on a beat, like you need to end on this beat. So he would like think of when to fade things out, because I just was like crossfade. So he really just taught me like people will pay attention to that. And I think attention to detail is like something that I learned about the sound process. Like every little sound counts. And also he could tell when something was recorded with a boom versus like a lav. Like when I'm editing with my little like Beats headphones, which is embarrassing, I don't hear like the difference between the boom and the lav, but when you're in that space, you're like, oh, that sounds like tinny, like it sounds weird. And so he noticed those things and really leveled it out, which is really nice.
Dialogue editing is kind of a magical
I hate
process.
it. Oh, yeah. But yeah, it is very much.
But it makes a big difference. You're right. It's not that much fun.
I just remember going into, like after the sound mix, I watched Creed 3 like in a theater, and I was just paying attention to the sound the entire time. Like I was like, whoa, this like, I heard this little car here, and I heard the little punching. Like it was, now I pay attention to sound more in films.
That's good. Thomas, what about you?
One of the most memorable things I heard, like growing up when I was absorbing as much as I could starting out, was you can watch a film that sounds great but looks terrible, but you can't watch a film that looks great and sounds terrible. And so for me, like I really brought that into Atmos, and it was just a phenomenal experience because Eric Foreman, who worked with me on my mix, I just kept calling him a wizard because he's just waving everything around. But I had these 3 dream sequences in my short film, and I knew going into that, like I wanted everything to fly around the room. I wanted their voices to be in this like reverberation and to be in different spots. So it really kind of feels like you're disoriented in the same way the character is. And for me, I think the thing that I learned the most was just like how to build that out in more body. Like the understanding of like clean audio and not overmodulating it and making sure that you're covering your tracks with room tone. Like that all made sense to me, but really building out the depth of it because of what Atmos can do, you can really build out so many different layers that are placed in the smallest way possible. It's like finite detail that you might not hear unless you're in a Dolby theater, but it's crucial to every viewing experience, no matter where you are and how you're listening to it. So for me, it was really just kind of like taking those principles and just blowing them up.
So final question before I let you all go. We're going to do year 3 of the Finish the Script Challenge with the Ghetto Film School. So there will be another cohort of filmmakers coming along behind all of you at some point pretty soon. What's a piece of advice that you would give them, something that you wish that you had known when you started off on this journey?
The advice I could give to the future class 3, or even the people that are applying is, be patient with yourself and be kind to yourself. It's really difficult writing a script, let alone making an outline or even a pitch deck, especially because first time, and that was my first time making one that was like that in depth. And to just like also plan, I think like you think you plan enough and there's no such thing as like over planning. Honestly, that's what I've learned. But I also learned like to humanize more, and like I think in filmmaking, and I was just reflecting on this earlier when Brittany was talking about like how do you treat your crew, and you have to remember to like humanize your team, your cast, your crew, all the people that are supporting you. And I feel like in filmmaking, I talked about it being difficult. I think that's just something in general that we forget to do. And these people are like, they, again, are there on your time. Your team is there on your time. But also, like, you have to support them and you have to listen to them. And you have to respect them. And I think, like, that was one of the most important things is, like, as a leader of a team and they're all, like, relying on you, you have to remember that like they are human and people make mistakes and you need to have some grace. And I think that's the biggest thing I could give to the next class.
For me, going into this process, I was a little bit different from the other filmmakers in the sense that I was like still in school. I was still freelancing. The other filmmakers, obviously they like graduated, they're like doing their full-time jobs. I was still like going through school, and it was definitely a lot, like handling this along with school, and like I had an internship I think at the time, and like doing all these other things and being on other sets. So for any filmmakers that are younger and are still in school doing other things, like you really have to learn to make this a priority, even from the start. Like I had so many other things going on that I was like, oh, I can handle all of it, but I didn't really make it a priority or realize how much of a priority it was until like a little bit later on. So I think you really have to like make this your number one. This is your child, you have to make it your child. And I think the other thing is you have all of these amazing professionals and technology at your disposal. Like use it to the best of your advantage, because you don't know if you'll ever get this opportunity again. And that's something I realized, like you really need to like talk with these people in the industry. They have so much knowledge and experience, like really take advantage of that and live in the moment. That's something that I did a little bit on set, but I feel like up until this point, and even probably a week from now, I won't fathom that this is actually over. And so I feel like you really need to take every day and be like, dang, like I'm working with Dolby, I'm working with all these amazing people, like this is an amazing opportunity. Everyone that I've talked to is like, Brittany, like this is crazy, like they flew you out to LA, you're doing all these crazy things. So you really just need to just say that to yourself every day, like you are working with Dolby and it's so cool, and hopefully more things will come out of this. And like Carlos said, even when you're anxious or like stressed about your career, because there will be anxiety, think about this experience and that you were capable of doing that. Like there's so many challenges, but you did that.
The thing that I would say to the incoming freshmen would be check yourself before you walk through the door. Make sure that you're not coming in with an ego, that you don't know everything. These people are here to educate you. They're here to encourage you. They're here to answer your questions. With you, Glenn, I remember asking you all kinds of questions at the workshop. With Eric on my sound mixing, like I remember just like trying to absorb as much information as possible. And on the flip side, don't let your insecurities rule you. Like recognize that these people believe in you and they gave you this opportunity. And by you sitting there and feeling insecure, you're wasting time and you're getting in your own way. So try to find that balance as often as you can. Just center yourself and realize that like you don't know everything, but you know something, and there's people behind you.
I'm confident that each of you is just starting on a really interesting career path, and hopefully you'll be back on the Dolby Podcast again talking about a feature film sometime down the road.
Yes, I hope so.
Yeah.
Really, really proud of the films and proud of the way that each of you showed up, went through this process, and learned a lot and made these films. Congratulations to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Many thanks to our brave filmmakers, Thomas, Brittany, and Caitlin, for being so open to talk with us today. And a special thanks also to Carlos López Estrada and everyone at the Ghetto Film School for their collaboration with us on this amazing program. You can watch all the films from this year's Finish the Script Challenge on Dolby's YouTube channel, along with some amazing behind-the-scenes videos by Ian Sotzing and Jordan Fatke. And as always, you can find links in our show notes. If you'd like even more conversations with artists and filmmakers about how they use technology to tell their stories, please make sure you are subscribed to us, the Dolby Institute Podcast. You can find links to our show on all the major podcasting platforms, including our video version on YouTube, in our show notes. Or you can simply search for Dolby wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're curious to know more about the Dolby Institute, head on over to dolbyinstitute.com. There you will find information about all of our programs. You can access the entire library of episodes of this podcast, and you can sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, thanks again for joining us. This is the Dolby Institute Podcast. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. And our production coordinator is Sunny Chen. Thanks again for listening.